Welcome to Life L'Chaim. On today's program, Rabbi Thompson talks with Dr. Raanan Gissin, a former senior advisor to Israel Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Israeli media spokesperson. And we'll hear Dr. Gissin talk about the security of Israel. We'll be right back after these messages.
Today we are at Sunrise Jewish Center in Sunrise, Florida with Dr. Raanan Gissin, a well-known media specialist and analyst for the State of Israel. Dr. Gissin, I want to thank you for joining us on L'Chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good morning.
Good morning. You are currently touring the United States, bringing a message about Israel and the Iran situation. Tell us a little bit about the message you're bringing.
Well, I'm doing a tour of the East Coast, mainly of the United States. I've been to New York, now I'm in Florida. I'm going to be in Washington and Baltimore. I speak to various Jewish organizations, Jewish National Fund, Israel Bonds, and whoever is ready to listen. And the message I'm bringing is, I would say in a metaphorical sense, is how does Israel deal with the four very difficult seasons that it faces? The Arab Spring, the Iranian winter, the global economic autumn, and the Israeli summer, which, we had the protests during the summer. And then again, I'm saying that the fact that there is an Israel today, and with all the problems and challenges that we see surrounding us, then this country called Israel has solutions. These kind of elements did not exist in the past. When we look back at history, we see a similar situation that existed maybe 78, 75 years ago with the rise of Nazi Germany, but without an Israel and without the bomb.
So how has the Iranian threat changed that dynamics this time around?
I think the Iranian threat and the quest of Iran to achieve a nuclear bomb, and coupled, I'd say, with this aggressive policy of hostile takeover of countries that have succumbed or fallen prey to the Arab Spring in the world, is really something that had raised the concern not only of Jews around the world, but I think of members of that endangered species called democracy. And they live in the United States, in Great Britain, in France, in a couple of other Western countries, which are today threatened and challenged by this rise of, I would say, the Iranian threat in its entirety, not just the bomb, but as I said, terrorism and the support of that. And Israel is right in the middle, and we are the sort of the testing ground for this policy, because on our northern border we have Hezbollah in Lebanon. With the decline of Syria, or the civil war that is breaking up in Syria, Hezbollah and controlling Lebanon is going to provide a major threat to us, backed by Iran, with 40,000 missiles covering the state of Israel. And in the south we have Habastan, that is the control of Hamas of Gaza, again with something like 10,000 missiles, also supported by Iran. And we see every now and then a flare-up of the situation, which has a lot to do not just with the fact that these forces there are opposed to Israel, but with the fact that they are directed, financed, and supported by Iran.
Let me ask you, I know you often appear on Al Jazeera TV. I think of it as you are the voice of Israel on Al Jazeera. Do you find that an impossible mission? What do you do to try to communicate to the Arab world?
Well, first of all, a secret and my own personal revelation. I was trained as a paratrooper, in the Israeli forces. The whole concept and philosophy is you operate behind enemy lines, or in other words, the war. If it's the war of words or a real war, you bring into enemy territory. So that's the reason I spent most of my time and energy trying to appear on Arab television. You reach a certain audience which you want to reach with the right message. To use the vernacular, I don't take prisoners and I don't make any discounts on this. I tell them the story of Israel. I tell them the prospect that they have if they make peace with Israel, or if they make a deal with Israel, and also what would happen if they continue to mess with us, because we don't take kindly to those who mess with us, and we have the proper response and the proper answers to do so. And as a matter of fact, the entire rest of the world that has decided to stand up against this, I would say, Islamofascism that is engulfing the rest of the world, are copying the Israeli methods of doing it. Look at the United States and taking out bin Laden. The first time I was asked on television, I said the first time an American president acts like a real Israeli.
There you go. We are at a Flame Society function today to kick off the Flame Society as a organization to promote education about the Holocaust. I know it's a very important cause to you and something you feel deeply about. Tell me, as an Israeli and sixth generation, seventh generation Israeli?
Sixth generation.
Sixth generation. How do you view, what message should we be sending about the Holocaust to the world right now?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, the first time Emmy Levy approached me in Israel and said, listen, you know, we want you to harness yourself to this thing. And I'm not involved in politics. As a matter of fact, officially I retired from any other function. I said, this is a good cause to carry because I think the question of remembrance is a strategic question, not just for Israel, but for the entire world. Because if I would take and juxtapose the four seasons that I talked to you about, the Iranian winter, the Arab Spring, the global economic autumn, the economic crisis, as well as the internal upheaval that took place in Israel, these are the same kind of elements that existed 78 years ago. If I take you on a journey through time, back to the 30s, then you see the rise of Nazi Germany in 1933 occurred through democratic election. The rise of the Salafist or the Muslim Brotherhood with all its ominous trends is occurring in Egypt through the democratic elections. The same thing. At the same time when the Nazis controlled the Reichstag, they also were in the streets. And in the street they created havoc and riots and I would say the harbinger of Kristallnacht was there already in the street. Go after the Jews, the rise of anti-Semitism then and now, and the weakness of the superpowers today and in the past, the Chamberlain waving his umbrella and saying, I have brought peace in our time. Hostile takeover of countries. Germany takes over Czechoslovakia. Iran is taking over Lebanon, taking over and maybe other countries that have fallen prey to the Arab Spring. The similarities are just glaring, they're just frightening, you know. And that is the reason why you have to remember the past. If you remember the past, then you don't repeat mistakes in the future, particularly when you have generations that will have not known anything about the past and have no knowledge of it, or at least, I wouldn't say knowledge, but a picture of the past. And I think that's the purpose of the Flame Society. The Flame Society is to create the pictures in people's mind of why they need to remember and what they need to remember. Because if we remember, or if to use the phrase, you know, if we never forget, then there's good chances it will never happen again. In other words, then we can actually prepare for it not to happen again. For Israel to carry the banner of never again requires as a prerequisite that the world today and future generations yet unborn will understand that they should never forget.
I just want to ask you, as an Israeli and as a media analyst, what do you make of the anti-Semitic, the anti-Jewish parts of what you're seeing going on in America with the Occupy Wall Street movement and those who have branched out from that movement? How are you perceiving that?
Well, it happened in the past, but it has been exacerbated or multiplied several times because of the new type of media that we have. An all-embracing multimedia, talking about the new media, talking about the internet, about the Facebook, about Twitter. Everything happens faster, quicker, to a larger audience. And therefore, when you want to spread the anti-Semitic word, you know, it is like brush fire. It's very easy to put very simple themes like that and reach today, not just via television, but millions of households, you know, through the internet and through the social networks. And I see a very ominous trend that in this cyber warfare, those who want to destroy Israel, those who want to annihilate the Jewish people, make very effective use of this method, of this system, better than we do. In other words, we have to take cognizance of the fact that there's a new theater of war, a new means of war that we have to apply in order to counter or neutralize this venomous effect of the spreading of anti-Semitism around the world, because this is what will enable the neo-fascists, I would say, the Islamo-fascist groups around the world to get ascendancy and mobilize even people who are not of their faith against the Jewish people.
And what would you advise American Jews who might be a little more apathetic than Israeli Jews, and they turn their head and say it's a small, meaningless movement? What would you say to them about these terrible signs we've seen at Occupy Wall Street?
If we go back to the past and we remember what was the common denominator, the worst thing that happened there, the worst thing that happened is that the world remained silent. For years, when the Nazi rose to power, when anti-Semitism, that beast was gaining momentum, the world remained silent. No one wanted to say, and there were even some Jewish groups say, don't rock the boats. Some Jews who lived in Germany at the time. This should not be repeated. Everyone has to stand up and be counted and speak out. And I think the Flame Society provides the right vehicle for people who have a case, who have a cause, who want to ensure the future of their children. Not just the future of their children in terms of their security, to stand up now, to speak out, and to do whatever they can in order to secure a different future than the ones that those who are opposed to us and those who want to destroy the Jewish people foresee and envision for this troubled world.
I want to go back. You said that those who are against Israel and those who are trying to put the economic downturn in America on the backs of quote-unquote Jewish bankers,
exactly, yeah,
that they're winning the cyber war. What do we need to do to strike back? I mean, posting YouTube videos, what do we need to do? What's the strategy?
We need special, I would say, commando troops, groups of young people organized with blogs and networking of all these groups together, with messages that would come maybe from Israel through an invisible hand. The government is hands off. It has to be these NGOs that work and that are the front. Flame Society is one of these elements, but it must be integrated with several. It has to be an integration of all these networks, like the Iranians are doing with the integration of all those, I'd say, Islamo-fascist groups together in the internet. And it has to be 24/7. In other words, the message has to come over. And rather than have a message, just a message of saying, it's worse, it's bad, wait, we have to stop this, we have to have a good narrative, a positive narrative that tells this is what Israel is doing, this is what we are doing, and this is the narrative, and if we don't do it, and if you're not there, this is what's going to happen. Or in other words, if we make a comparison between the past...
Well, I don't know, are you saying that good narrative is a veiled threat?
No, that what Israel has to offer in order to resolve the situation. I'm saying very simply, if we juxtapose, the first movie, that was what happened before World War II, and the sequel, what happened now, today, there are two things which are different. One, there was no Israel then, no Israel that was capable of standing up, no Israel that had solutions to the problem, no Israel that had the tenacity and determination and unite the Jewish people in the struggle against it, and Germany did not have the bomb. In other words, they had the bomb at the end of the war. And now there's a possibility that if we don't stop it, if we don't stop Iran in its track, and it's not just the bomb, stop this whole campaign of delegitimizing Israel, of allowing a country like Iran to be able to do hostile takeover of democracies, then we won't be able to stop the bomb as well.
Dr. Gissin, I want to thank you for being with us today, and hope you get that message out, and I hope for our viewers that you have inspired them to help in many ways to get that message out. Thank you.
Don't ask what you can do. Don't ask what the future can do for you. Ask what you can do for your future generations.
Great, thank you.
Just a couple of weeks ago, I met with Emil in Israel, and we drank a couple of glasses of wine, and then I decided, this is something that's worth working for, and something that needs to be done. And the need is always what comes first as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very happy that we have this gathering here to launch something which I think is of strategic importance, not just to Israel, but to the entire world. Those who do not learn from the past and don't know about the past are bound to repeat the same mistakes in the future. And if the hallmark of Israel, or I should say, if we look at the map of the world today, is a radar screen, a global radar screen. Each country has its own signature. On a radar screen, planes, blip. They have blips. And each blip is different. Well, some are friends, some are foes, some are neutral. The blip of Israel, the Jewish people, is a very unique one. There is no such blip on the radar screen of the world, and there won't be anything. And when it blips twice. Once, never to forget. And the second blip, never again. 68 years ago, there was no Israel blip on the world radar screen. None. And that perhaps is one of the reasons why today we need that blip to continue to blip. But it won't blip, and we won't see it if you don't bring the past and make it live to generations yet unborn. The second generation of Holocaust survivors can do the job and others can do, but what about the future? In order to understand what lies ahead of us and what we have to do, we really have to understand what is happening now around us. And through the time I've been spending in the United States now for the past 2 weeks, I've been trying to make people understand what is the environment in which we operate. As an amateur singer, during my study in the United States, Syracuse University, I used to sing in pubs around the country there. A famous song one at the time was by Bob Zimmerman, then later known as Bob Dylan. In the 70s of the last century, it says, the times they are changing, and the times are changing around us. Everything is changing. And his advice in that song, to people who want to survive, including the people at the State of Israel, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone because the times are changing. And indeed, that has been the motto of my action and deeds after I retired and what I'm trying to do around it. But I understand, as being a man who also has been in the business, so to speak, of television for 25 years, people don't relate to messages. They relate to narratives, to pictures. So I will try to create some pictures in your mind and take you on a journey to the future and then back to the past so that you can make the comparison and understand why it's so important to remember. Well, in the past year or so, there were the soundbite, or the acronym of what they call what's happening around us is the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, the rise of the Arab nations like in Europe of 1848, and the quest for democracy, removing the yoke of authoritarian, sectarian, totalitarian regime, and vying for democracy. And here, eventually, the Arab people are going to be able to realize their rightful rights, which they were denied, and become democratic, and peace upon earth will reign. It didn't work that way. Slide away from the Arab Spring in the past year lies the Iranian winter, or the Arab Iranian Muslim winter, because of the fact that there wasn't the necessary culture to support democracy, and those who fill the void are fascist Islamo groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and others who are waiting patiently at the sideline to see the collapse of these regimes so that they can engage in a takeover. Masterminding and orchestrating this whole thing of the Arab Spring, or utilizing the Pandora box that was opened when the Arab Spring sprung, is Iran. Iran is engaged not only in building a bomb, and that is definitely the first sign of what I call the Iranian winter, but in a hostile takeover of regimes that are falling and introducing through a Trojan horse tactic into their own system radical Islamic groups and groups who would like to be able to change the nature of the map of the Middle East. It is not just erasing Israel off the map that the Iranians are trying to achieve, as Ahmadinejad claimed so many times, without Western response, but to erase the map, get a new world order, a new world map, and of course with Iran making its strides back to the ancient imperial desires that it had to become an empire in the Middle East, as it was 4,000, 3,000 years ago. But that's only half the story. So for many years, about 15 years, we marched, the March of Living, an excellent, beautiful project. But something was missing. I told you there are two signals on the Israeli signature on the radar screen. One, never to forget. The other, never again. We came to the Polish government 10 years ago. We said, we want the flyover of 4 F-15s every time there's a March of Living. Oh, they said, no, the weather is not good. You'll have to fly at higher altitude. We Israelis, we have the tahbula. We always know how to. We flew. We got the first flight, at really, very low altitude, flying over the March. 4 Israeli pilots. 2 second-generation Holocaust survivors. What is the significance of this picture? It was very moving, very touching. People looked up, and they flew back and forth. They did not fly there. Allied forces plane did not fly over those camps in 1944 when they could. This time they flew. The March of the Living on the ground is so that we will never forget and the world will not forget. The flyover of the F-15I, a clear reminder to anyone that it will never happen again. And that's the message. Flame Society will be involved in the first phase. But the first phase of keeping the memory alive for generations to come will ensure that it will never happen again. Because 20, 30, 40 years from now, it's going to be a younger generation. They'll be bright, they'll be resourceful, they'll be capable, they'll have the best technology in the world. But will they have the sense of history of what happened so that they can stand up and do something? This is your and my responsibility. Don't ask what the future can do for your children. Ask what you can do for the future of your children. Thank you.
That's it for this edition. Don't forget to visit our Facebook page for all the latest news about our program. I'm Lee Lazarson. Thanks for joining us on To Life L'Chaim.